ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਦਿਸ ਐਪੀਸੋਡ ਆਫ ਦਾ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਸ਼ੋ। ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਸੈਗਮੈਂਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਕਰਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਵਾਰੰਟ ਆਫਿਸਰ ਬ੍ਰਾਇਨ ਮੈਕੈਨਾ ਨਾਲ। ਇਹ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਹਾਲ ਹੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਵਾਨਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪੋਸਟ ਟਰਾਮੈਟਿਕ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਡਿਸਆਰਡਰ ਤੋਂ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ 4 ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਆਤਮ ਹੱਤਿਆ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਲਈ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਣੇ ਆ ਬ੍ਰਾਇਨ ਮੈਕੈਨਾ ਤੋਂ। Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. A little bit about yourself, since how long you have been in the Army and where all have you served?
Sure. I joined the military in November of 1995. And between now and then, I've been to Afghanistan twice and Bosnia twice as well.
Okay. So while over there and you saw what happens in war, and you also suffered from PTSD. So if you could tell us what actually is it in the Army, because now these things are coming out. Before also Army men used to go for operations, but we didn't used to hear these kind of things. What's actually happening in the Canadian Army?
Right. Very good question, and it's a complicated question. One of the things I've noticed myself, in Canada, what we would call hypervigilance is just vigilance in Afghanistan. Those things that keep you alive over there tend to be the things that keep you awake and give you nightmares back here. So when you deploy to a place where everything's falling apart, we want you to be aware of everything around you.
Right.
The problem with that is that when I come home, I don't let a person walk by me without me inspecting their hands and figuring out if they're a threat to me. So one of the things post-traumatic stress does is your body keeps reacting like you're in Rwanda or Sierra Leone or Bosnia, but you're not. You're grocery shopping. You're standing in line trying to pay for bread, and you can feel the pressure of the people behind you. And you have to, in my case, turn around and visually see that they're not a threat.
Right.
That's one of the ways PTSD materializes for me.
And how did you come to realize that you're also passing through this phase?
Yeah, the biggest way I noticed it was on the road. I would do things that they were beyond unsafe, speeds that you shouldn't be traveling. And what I really noticed was whenever I was in a situation on the road where the brake could solve the pedal, solve the problem, or the gas pedal would, it was always the gas pedal. I was always taking the aggressive way to get out of situations. And that was one of the first ways I knew there was a problem.
Right.
Going to bed suddenly took me hours. And I would sit there having to relive one certain problem one day from start to finish. And if I tried to cut off or cut that memory short, I couldn't get to bed. So every night I was going through the same event every time.
So first of all, it requires courage to accept this and then also talk about it. What about your family? Did they also feel some difference in you? And how were you able to come out and start talking about this?
Yeah, they noticed it for sure, specifically my wife. My kids noticed a difference, but they don't really know what questions to ask.
Right.
They're 7 and 4 right now. Someday they'll ask, and I'm going to need a real answer for them. Yeah, it started to materialize in me, but I lost my ability to keep it inside after a while, and everyone started noticing it. I would say, though, when you run into people that know veterans from years past, we often get this question of how come there was no PTSD back then.
Right.
But if someone introduces himself and says, my grandpa was in the Army, the next line he'll say is, he doesn't talk about it. Well, years and years of having 6, 7, 8 years of your life that you don't talk about is not normal. That's not how we normally function. But if you can't handle it, that's what you do. The modern era of veterans, we carry in a smartphone in our pockets like everybody else, so I can communicate to the guys I served with that live in Cape Breton.
Right.
Or Prince Edward Island. So we know that we can talk, we have the ability to talk, and we're not just going to, for lack of a better term, go to a bar to solve the problem.
Right. And when you start talking, in light right now what we have seen in the Canadian Army, this thing is being talked about all over. Before, it was not much talked about, but then definitely, as you said, there was talk in between you comrades, but not outside. Now, it's very unfortunate that 4 of our Canadian soldiers have taken their own lives, and now this issue has come forward and it's being talked on a bigger level. But this crisis is waiting to happen, kind of thing. What all is happening? Like when you come back from deployment, isn't there a reorientation? Aren't you given that kind of time and energy by the forces that you are back now and you are going to be settled down?
For me, when I come home, I feel that I get off the plane in the middle of a society that doesn't know what's going on. Our forefathers, your forefathers, when there was a war, the country dealt with the conflict. The army went and fought, fair enough. But throughout Canada, lights were not on in the evenings in World War II. You got butter and bread rationing. You turned in extra pots to build jets. The country knew it was at war. When I get off the airplane and I walk to the car, I'm not surrounded by citizens that understand that currently, to this day, this is a country at war. And often those terms are being used, war on drugs, war on terror, and we like to use the word more often than it need be. You can hear football teams say that they fought in the trenches last night. That's how common jargon that the words have become, but they mean something to us. We came from a war zone, and then 4 or 5 days later, you're standing at the grocery store. You know, and there is some decompression. It's good. It's necessary. We've been doing it in Cyprus for a number of years. Having said that, to turn the switch of your body all the way and ramp it as high as we can, it needs a gradual rescinding of that. You don't just come home. And that can be a bit of an adjustment.
We'll continue with our discussion. We'll go for a small break, come back and talk a little bit about your deployment in these war zones. What kind of environment was there and what impact that still has on you, and also the crisis what we are facing and what the government is doing and what the common citizens can do. We'll talk after this break. So ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਜੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਬ੍ਰਾਇਨ ਮੈਕੈਨਾ ਨਾਲ, ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੰਟ ਆਫਿਸਰ ਨੇ 1995 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜ ਵਿੱਚ ਗਏ, ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ ਵਿੱਚ 2 ਵਾਰੀ ਗਏ, ਬੋਸਨੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ 2 ਵਾਰ ਗਏ, ਅਤੇ ਜੋ ਕੁਝ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਉਸ ਦਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਅਸਰ ਪਿਆ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਮੇਂ ਗਏ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਫੋਰਫਾਦਰਸ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਫੋਰਫਾਦਰਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਨ ਜਦੋਂ ਜੰਗ 'ਚੋਂ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ, ਦੇਸ਼ ਵਾਰ 'ਤੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ। ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਹੁਣ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਜਹਾਜ਼ ਤੋਂ ਥੱਲੇ ਉਤਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੰਝ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਥਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਹੀ ਆ ਗਏ ਹਾਂ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਜੰਗ ਕੀ ਹੈ। ਸਮਾਂ ਬਦਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਜੋ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਾਰ ਜ਼ੋਨਸ 'ਚੋਂ ਵਾਪਸ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਇਹਨਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਬਰਕਰਾਰ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਰੋਜ਼ਮਰਾ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੇਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਵੀ ਪੋਸਟ ਟਰਾਮੈਟਿਕ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਡਿਸਆਰਡਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਫਰ ਕਰਦਾ ਸੀ ਅਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਕਬੂਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਬੜਾ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲ ਹੋਇਆ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕਾਮਰੇਡਸ ਨਾਲ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਯੁੱਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਫੋਨਸ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਾਤਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਅਲਟੀਮੇਟਲੀ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈ। ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਉਹ ਜ਼ੋਨ 'ਚ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਇਹ ਤਿਆਰ ਬਰ ਤਿਆਰ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਕਿਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਹਮਲਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੁਲਕ 'ਚ ਵਾਪਸ ਆ ਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਰ ਪੁੱਛਣ ਵਾਲਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਵੱਧ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਕਾਰਨ ਇਹ ਪੋਸਟ ਟਰਾਮੈਟਿਕ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਡਿਸਆਰਡਰ ਵੱਧ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਹੋਰ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਰਹੇਗੀ, ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਦ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਸ਼ੋ। Once again, welcome back to the program. In today's segment, we are talking to Warrant Officer Brian McKenna, who is a war veteran and he has been into Afghanistan and Bosnia twice. ਕੀ ਸਮੱਸਿਆਵਾਂ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਉਸ ਵਾਰ ਜ਼ੋਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੁਝ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ। Canadian Army has been known as peacekeeping forces and they have been going, and that's what the public knows about it. When you are in that war zone, what happens? What's the kind of environment? Please make us aware about it.
My opinion is that what the public believes is peacekeeping hasn't really existed in about 30 years. Now, there have been some conflicts around the world where 2 former combatant sides have asked someone to get in the middle and maintain the peace. That has happened. That is the traditional peacekeeping that a lot of people think of. It progresses after a while to the sides not trusting each other but learning to live, and has even progressed to the part that, say, the soldiers are merely manning a position, even handing out aid. That hasn't happened in about 3 decades. And the problem I find it actually scares me when people say, let's go back to peacekeeping, because that's their vision of what they think we're going back to. We haven't been doing that ever since I've been in the military.
Right.
The conflict in Bosnia did not have that.
Right.
The conflict in Bosnia had people that had to actively fight and defend themselves. Croatia as well, and so on.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that is not understood well in this society. And I think it's up to Canadians to educate themselves and us to educate them as to what it really is.
Because the message which has been given to the Canadian people is something different, that peacekeeping is just being on the sides and, as you said, not that active participation. But what is happening is absolutely different. So in Afghanistan and Bosnia, where you served twice, give us some reflection into it. What was the kind of environment in which you worked, and that still is being carried in your mind?
Right. Getting off the plane and landing at an airport in Croatia where 6 attack helicopters are facing every plane that lands on the ground gives you an idea of the message that they want to send to you when you get there. Traveling through Croatia into Bosnia and finding more blown up buildings than one still standing. Mine signs all over the place. The remnants of war piled up just like litter would pile up here. And that's the opening reminder that you're not going into a normal society.
Right.
Over time, you become used to seeing people that are armed and actually being comfortable being around them.
Right.
For me, a soldier with a weapon slung over his shoulder or held loosely in his hands pointed at the ground, I don't see a threat there at all. I'm very comfortable around that guy. A police officer with his hands in his pockets scares me because I've come over time to see which one's actually more scarier.
Right.
That's something that a lot of people don't understand. Back here in Canada, a gun is a scary thing.
Right.
Well, in the world it isn't though. In the real world, people have multiple of them, and that's a form of language.
Right.
That's one of the things that really was stuck in my mind from Bosnia.
Right.
Watching old people suffer. Everyone's used to hearing that no one wants to see kids in pain or kids starving, and that's very true. For me, watching senior citizens climb through garbage looking for food, that was actually more troubling for me.
Right.
And 20 years later, that's still what you think of.
Right, you're very right. That's what keeps on intriguing you, and that just gets set in your mind. So now the question is that in 2006, a new charter was framed for the Canadian Army veterans. What changes have come, and why do you feel that the kind of assurance which the government should have given you, you are not getting that, and that is a major factor in your minds when you come back, that we went there, fought, many of the soldiers got killed, many of the soldiers got disabled, and when they come back, they see that they're not being treated well, and how much effect that has on your life?
It makes you feel that what you've done wasn't respected. When you have an injury, I have no problem with temporary care or one-time care.
Right.
When that injury now is a disability, I have a problem with one-time care. That's my view.
Right.
If I'm still going to be without that foot for the rest of my life, I should be with the care and compensation that reflects that situation for the rest of my life. That's my view.
Right.
And for someone to tell me that they would ever have the ability to pay me once for what I will deal with every day is a struggle. For me, I'm lucky to have all the parts of my body intact. I have some intestinal issues that have come up from service in Afghanistan. Post-traumatic stress is very evident in my life. I don't live a couple of minutes without being reminded one way or the other of what's going on. It affects my life greatly. Any amount of money that someone could tell you they could give you once that will predict and solve and compensate that for the rest of your life, no.
We'll continue with the discussion as to how the common people also, and this awareness what you're talking about, how that can be more, and how that respect, because of a Canadian Army officer who goes and serves, he's doing it for the country, not for oneself. But once you come back and that kind of treatment and good respect is not given, the feelings what you are exhibiting today are, we are feeling that. So what needs to be done, we'll talk about this after this break. ਸੋ ਜਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਬ੍ਰਾਇਨ ਮੈਕੈਨਾ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜੀ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ 2 ਵਾਰੀ ਬੋਸਨੀਆ ਅਤੇ ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਕੁਝ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੀਤਾ, ਹਾਲਾਤ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਉੱਥੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਲੈਂਡ ਹੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਡਿਸਟਰੋਇਡ ਬਿਲਡਿੰਗਸ ਨੇ, ਹੱਥਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਥਿਆਰ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਗਰਾਊਂਡ ਰਿਐਲਿਟੀਜ਼ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਨੇ। ਜਿੱਥੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਸਫ਼ਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਵੇਖਿਆ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਪਾਈਲਸ ਆਫ ਗਾਰਬੇਜ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਖਾਣੇ ਲੱਭਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਬਹੁਤ ਮਾੜੀ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਅਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਵਾਪਸ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਇੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਰਿਸਪੈਕਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਦੀ। ਅਤੇ 2006 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਨਵਾਂ ਚਾਰਟਰ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੈਟਰਨਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਉਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਬਦੀਲੀਆਂ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ। ਇੱਕ ਫੌਜੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਾਪਸ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਬੜਾ ਖੁਸ਼ ਕਿਸਮਤ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਬਾਡੀ ਦੇ ਅੰਗ ਠੀਕ ਨੇ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਜੋ ਮੇਰੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਹੈ ਪੋਸਟ ਟਰਾਮੈਟਿਕ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਡਿਸਆਰਡਰ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮੇਰੀਆਂ ਇੰਟਰਨਲ ਇੰਜਰੀਜ਼ ਨੇ, ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਜੇਕਰ ਕੋਈ ਕਹੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ 1 ਟਾਈਮ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੰਪਨਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਦਾਂਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਕੇਅਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ 1 ਟਾਈਮ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਉਸ ਕਾਰਨ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਟ੍ਰੈਸ ਹੋਰ ਵੱਧ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਹੋਰ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਕੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਅਤੇ ਆਮ ਜਨਤਾ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ। Once again, welcome back to the program. It's a great honor to have Warrant Officer Brian McKenna today, who is talking to us and telling us as to where the Canadian Army stands today and what are the soldiers feeling about it. ਜੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਉਸ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਕਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪੀਸ ਕੀਪਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟਰਮ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਪਿਛਲੇ 3 ਦਹਾਕਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜਾਂ ਪੀਸ ਕੀਪਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੀਆਂ, ਐਕਟਿਵਲੀ ਇਹ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ। ਕੀ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਆਓ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ। So now that as you talked about the care, the compensation, the respect which is not being given, and even from the common people also, that mentality has changed from the world wars and time is changing. People just consider it as to be another job which a army man is doing. He's doing his job, but that country attachment, that affiliation is no more or less visible as it was to be seen before. What can the government do? What are you demanding from the government? Because right now, as you said, a soldier who comes back is more concerned about his future because you do not know, because of this PTSD, you might be kicked out of the army and you won't have anything to fend for yourself and for your family. So what the government needs to do and how can the common public also put pressure?
What I feel is within the organization, the military itself, and also the Department of Veterans Affairs, they need a culture shift. Many years ago, you might be aware that the military didn't have women throughout all the trades. And the different identifying marks of the Sikh faith, for example, couldn't be worn in the army. That got changed by one means. It got changed by leadership deciding that that's going to change now.
Right.
Culture change is hard, and it requires leadership at all levels, particularly the middle leadership. And that's what we need now. It is good to hear it come from the top. We need the middle leaders. We need the sergeant majors and the platoon warrants to turn around to their guys tomorrow and say, guess what? Our work environment's going to be an environment that is tolerant of people that need care and is a healthy place for mental health issues to come forward. That's really a critical thing. And at times, culture change needs a little bit of force. I suggest it needs force as well. Throughout the system of caring for veterans, we need to get out of the culture of no. In other words, when people have gone to Veterans Affairs, that's normally the first thing they hear. After they've been told to submit pages upon pages of questionnaires, which is really not what should be done for a poor young man who's going through a stressful moment. And then months later, he's sitting there waiting, staring at the mailbox, and what comes in the mail is no. And now he's got to launch an appeal to fight, for which will inevitably be yes. That's the system that really needs to get adjusted right now. I guess I'd sum it up like this. Soldiers are very industrious people. They're not used to asking for help, and they're not used to looking at a job and seeing, maybe I'll get this done. They're going to get it done. When they deal with a mental issue, they try and solve it on their own. And that's wrong, and we need to help them to think differently. But the very reality is that's how they're going to handle it. When they knock on the door of Veterans Affairs, they need a coiled spring. They need a system ready to launch into action. And telling them that we've brought our wait time from 7 months down to 4 is not an acceptable answer. Handing him a questionnaire is not an acceptable answer. He should not leave that building without his first appointment booked.
Do you feel betrayed by the government?
Well, I don't feel that. Personally, I've looked at my time in the military, and it's the proudest years of my life. I'm very happy to have served, and I tell you, if I thought I was in the mental condition to do so, I'd go back. My time, it's been the gem of my life in a lot of ways of making me who I am.
Right.
Most of the good things about me came after I was 17.
Right.
I didn't have my head on straight then. The Army did it, so I have to give credit where credit's due.
Of course.
And the functioning man that the society has right now is largely a credit to the Army.
No doubt.
That aside, our needs are real. They're present. They're ready to be dealt with right now, and they really can't wait for the 4th and 5th rounds of inquiries and committee hearings to answer the questions that have already been answered. We know what needs to happen.
Right, but if this thing continues the way it is happening, would the Army soldiers want, or any soldier would like their families to go into the defense services?
That's a big problem. You're very right about that. Recruiting will be a difficult thing when I can't look the kid in the eye and say, talk. You'll be okay. See, that's what I've been able to say for years.
Right.
Is I can tell them, you'll be honored if you're killed, and if you're wounded, you'll be looked after.
Absolutely.
I can't really say that in the current situation we're looking at.
Lastly, what would be your message to our viewers today, how they can raise their voice for the veterans?
You got to phone your MP. These issues are federal issues, and go to the federal government. The government will engage you. Make sure that they know that there's more than just one person in the riding that needs to know about this issue. If every MP is asked this 10, 20 times a week, they'll educate themselves more about the file, and we might start getting somewhere.
Brian, it was a pleasure having you. We are proud of the services of soldiers like you who are providing us security and safety in the democracies where we live. Thank you very much for all you have done, and we hope that this message goes across and the common people also come forward and start raising their voices through their member parliaments that the veterans need to be looked after well. Thank you and best wishes.
Proud to have done it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So आज जो साडे नाल गलबात की ब्रायन मैकेना ने अखीर विच इन्होंने बड़ा ही एक इंपॉर्टेंट मैसेज दिता है वो ये मैसेज है कि असी चाहते हाँ रिस्पैक्ट, असी चाहते हैं इज्जत, असी चाहते हैं कि जेकर यह ब्यूरोक्रेटिक सिस्टम जो बनया होया है इसनू खत्म किया जाए। एक फौजी जो वापस आए उसनू पूरा सम्मान मिले, उसनू ये पता होवे कि उसके देश ने, उसकी सरकार ने उहदे आने वाले समय वास्ते भी उस वास्ते सोचा होया है। ये ना होए कि इन्हों सोचना पवे कि असी फर्दर की करना है। एक सोल्जर जिहड़ा हैगा हमेशा ही सैल्फ रिस्पैक्ट ते डिपेंडेंट होंदा है ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਹੱਥ ਨਹੀਂ ਫੈਲਾਉਂਦਾ। ਇਹ ਇੰਡਸਟਰੀਅਸ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਦੇਸ਼ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਇੱਕ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਆਮ ਜਨਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟਸ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਗੇ ਲਿਆਓ ਕਿ ਵੈਟਰਨਸ ਦੀ ਸਹੀ ਦੇਖਭਾਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਏ। ਅਖੀਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਾਣ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਦੌਲਤ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਦਾ ਆਨੰਦ ਮਾਣ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਜੇਕਰ ਇਹ ਫੌਜੀ ਨਾ ਹੋਣ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਸਮਝ ਸਕਨੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ 'ਚ ਜੰਗ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਜੀਵਨ ਬਤੀਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬੜਾ ਮਾਣ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਫੌਜ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ।